Hello, welcome. I am Carrie Cooper. I'm Dean of University Libraries at William & Mary, and I am excited tonight to be partnering with the William & Mary Washington Center and the Alumni Association for tonight's talk with alumni author Nicole Lynn Lewis. This talk is part of the Washington Center's 20th anniversary celebration, which marks 2 decades since the center was established to be William & Mary's campus in Washington, D.C. This event is also part of the library's Alumni Author Talk Series, which features readings and discussions with William & Mary alumni authors. We have a wonderful community of alumni writers. A quick housekeeping item. Following Nicole's talk, you will have the opportunity to ask a question. Simply type your question or comment into the Q&A feature, and our moderators will ask Nicole your question. We will try to get to as many questions as we can in our time together this evening. Next, I'd like to introduce our moderators for our talk. Chon Glover is the Chief Diversity Officer for William & Mary. And Mariana Eraña Salmerón is a William & Mary class of 2021 graduate and is a Washington Center Peer Ambassador and a former study in DC student. Thank you, Chon and Mariana, for being with us today. Now I'll pass the program to Chon, who will introduce our guest.
Thank you, Carrie. Good evening. We are so happy to have you all here to join us in a conversation with Nicole Lynn Lewis. Mariana and I are very happy to be the moderators, and we look forward to your questions and a wonderful dialogue. Nicole, we invite you. Yes, thank you. We are so excited to have the opportunity to chat with you about your book today and just hear any wisdom that you're ready to share with us. One of the first questions that I would ask is just kind of tell the audience about yourself and why you wrote the book and anything you'd like for us to know as kind of a background and context before we begin.
Well, first, let me say I'm thrilled and honored to be here. I want to thank the William & Mary community for hosting this chat and being so supportive of Pregnant Girl and this project that's near and dear to my heart. And appreciate everyone who's tuned in and everyone who's been a part of planning this. So thank you so much. I today am a social entrepreneur. I am a founder of a nonprofit organization that's based in DC and serves the entire DC metro region, as well as does national work across the country. Our organization helps teen mothers and fathers in the DC region become college graduates while also helping their kids get ready for kindergarten. And we are also doing national work to advocate for the needs of parenting college students all across the country now. And we do that through a policy and advocacy agenda, but also working directly with institutions, higher ed institutions, to help them better serve parenting college students. And I'm a mother. I met my husband at William & Mary in college. And one of the many benefits of my post-secondary credential. And we have together 4 children, and our 5th child is just weeks away from coming into the world. So we are always busy, hands are always full, and we have a full house. And I'm also the author of Pregnant Girl, which, as I said, has been just a labor of love for me, really bringing this book into the world and sharing my story, but also the kind of universal story of teen pregnancy to the world. And so I'm really just excited and thrilled to be sharing it with everyone. I wrote the book because for many reasons, but I think a big reason for writing the book was really because most of us think we know what there is to know about teen pregnancy. And the reality is that much of what we do know is inaccurate and is damaging. And what we tend to do is kind of perpetuate these negative stereotypes each and every day without really having a full concept of what's going on in the lives of young people in this country and what is really going on and kind of the underlying issues that contribute to teen pregnancy and parenting. And those stereotypes often hold us back from providing the critical supports that young families really need to thrive, especially young parents in higher ed. So it's really about helping people to peel back kind of the layers and really start to try to understand this issue.
Wonderful, thank you. before Mariana begins, there are a couple things that Nicole left out. She omitted because she has done some wonderful things. Nicole is a member of the Board of Trustees of Trinity Washington University. She has received numerous awards, including being honored as a CNN Hero, a National Grand Prize winner for the Rosalind S. Jaffe Award. She's been featured on major news outlets like Good Morning America, CNN, NBC Nightly News, and the Washington Post. Nicole holds a master's degree in social policy and communication from George Mason University and a bachelor's degree in English from William and Mary. Nicole and her husband, as she mentioned, Dante Lewis, live in Maryland with their 4 children. Okay, Mariana, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Glover. Thank you again, Nicole, so much for being with us. So obviously you mentioned William and Mary is a big part of your story, and where so much happened for you. So I wanted to ask you why you chose William and Mary, and why you chose to have your experiences there.
So that's a really great question. I had originally, I got pregnant my senior year of high school, and I had just been admitted to several different colleges. And honestly, my top choice was University of Maryland. And that's because I wanted to be a journalist. And I was writing for the regional newspaper, the Virginian Pilot. And my editors told me, hey, if you're really interested in journalism, University of Maryland has a great journalism program. So I was like laser focused on University of Maryland. My sister went to William and Mary. So I was aware of William and Mary. I knew about it. And it was actually one of the schools that I did apply to in addition to University of Maryland. And then I got pregnant and the world turned upside down. Dreams and the goals and the kind of clear path became a little bit fuzzy. And I deferred my enrollment. And when it was time for me to try to accept my enrollment a year later, I was pregnant. I was, in this really tumultuous relationship with my daughter's father, and he was going at the shipyard in Newport News. And there wasn't any way that I could see how I was going to be able to go to Maryland. And so I decided to open my application to William and Mary and Hampton University, and was really pretty clear that I wanted to go to William and Mary. My sister had an amazing experience at William and Mary. And it made sense just from location and all of those things. And I had enjoyed all of my visits to campus. And, it's, as we all know, such a beautiful, beautiful campus. And I thought this was a good place for me to try to make college work as a young mom.
Thank you. I know mentioning campus, Dr. Glover, you were going to mention.
Yes, I just wanted to let everyone know that tomorrow morning, Nicole will be featured on NPR in the morning edition to discuss the book. And you actually filmed that on campus. So can you talk about how it felt to be back on campus?
Yeah, I love any opportunity to come back to campus. And so I was thrilled, even with the pandemic and all of the kind of restrictions that are in place that need to be in place. I was thrilled that Alyssa Nadworthy from NPR wanted to do this interview on site with me, which can kind of seem like, why is that necessary for a radio interview? But I can tell you, it was different. It was different to be back on campus and to be reflective about my experience as a young mom. We went to Tucker, where I took most of my classes, and sat out on the benches in front of Tucker and looked out at the sunken garden. And it was emotional. It was really emotional to be back on campus and to just try to put myself back in that place of, just trying to get through the next 24 hours as a young mom, and to take care of my daughter and to get good grades and to, make it to the next level, which was really tough. And so it was a different experience, I think, than if I had been on the phone with her sitting in my home. To actually be there on campus, walking those brick paths, and trying to really kind of tap into what was my mindset and my emotions at the time that I was a student there. So it was pretty incredible, and I'm hoping that emotion comes through in the interview tomorrow.
And I know that in your book, you have talked a little bit about your experiences at William and Mary. We'd love if you would just to share an excerpt from your book.
Yeah,
That would be wonderful.
absolutely. So I'm going to read from the chapter, All Good Things, in the book. My feet didn't belong on the 1,200-acre, perfectly manicured campus. They awkwardly shuffled from building to building under the towering trees in cheap black Walmart flip-flops, while patches of sunlight danced over them. Other students casually strolled along the winding brick paths, sipping from expensive water bottles and Starbucks cups full of iced coffee, or lounged on their backs in the luxuriant green grass of the sunken garden in the middle of Old Campus. Some families lingered for long goodbyes or to empty the last crate of towels from the trunk of their triple or double parked cars. Today was orientation. I crowded into William and Mary Hall, a 24,000 square foot facility that housed basketball games and other big events, along with hundreds of other freshmen, to be officially welcomed to the school and receive pertinent information for ensuring that my semester started smoothly. The school's colors, green and gold, decorated the walls and seats. A flag hung high above us that read Tribe Pride. I'd been to William and Mary Hall twice before. Once when I was 14 years old for a big concert with Anika, my sister, and then a couple of years later for her 3-hour graduation ceremony, during which President George H.W. Bush, the commencement speaker, called the school a place of possibilities. With goodie bags full of school branded swag at our feet, we took the honor pledge and listened to various students and President Sullivan talk about what a great 4 years it was going to be. To point out how accomplished our incoming class was, the president asked all of the students to stand who had earned the distinction of either valedictorian or salutatorians of their high school senior class to stand. And it seemed as if the entire crowd rose from their seats. The welcome speeches echoed through the stadium while I glanced at the faces of the other freshmen around me, some eager, some completely uninterested, very few the color of mine. I hung on every word, trying to commit each piece of advice to memory, mostly because I couldn't believe I'd made it this far, and I was scared that if I missed even one thing, I wouldn't make it any further. I knew that I was a glaring irregularity in a sea of white faces, exacerbating the feeling that my being there was a mistake.
Thank you for sharing that. That really spoke to me what you said about the piece of advice and feeling like you had to really keep that at the forefront. That describes exactly how I felt.
Yes.
During, the beginning, yeah, just orientation and feeling like, okay, how do I make it?
Yes, got to get it right, absorb all of the information.
Very much so. I think what you mentioned too of remembering those spaces, it's very, I don't know, there's something to be said that the space around us has an impact on our experiences. And I mean, campus is so beautiful and wonderful buildings. I know I would try to get into Tucker to because I loved it. It was close to my dorm. And I remember when I started my internship at Generation Hope as part of the DC Summer Institute, you told a story that really just impacted me. You talked about how, you know, we all talk about students going to the library and spending hours and hours there. And you mentioned like, well, I had my daughter with me. Like that was a space that I wasn't, you know, I didn't go many times into it because, you know, we talk about the third floor and how it has to be so quiet. And I'm sure that was like, oh no, like maybe that's not the place. So that like made me think of, wow, we were in the same space and yet I'm having a totally different experience that she had. And I know we were just talking before this, the progress that SWIM has made in our libraries and higher education is doing to make this a more accessible place to parents. And I know they had mentioned changing tables into for babies in the bathrooms, and that's great progress. So my question for you is, what were the challenges of being a mother in public spaces on campus?
Yeah, I think there were certain spaces that just weren't accessible to me. SWIM was one of them. And my husband came back to campus with me for me to film the NPR interview. And we were kind of driving around campus and he talked about how many nights he spent in SWIM. studying. And I'm like, that's so crazy because I was never in swim studying. I couldn't go to swim because Narissa was 3 months old when I started school. And certainly as an infant, that wasn't going to work. And then even as a toddler who's jumping around and laughing and giggling and having tantrums, I mean, it just wasn't realistic that I was going to be able to do any sort of studying in swim. So I can count on one hand the number of times in my 4 years at William & Mary that I actually went into swim. And when I did, it was probably for a very quick, short, grab a book and run out, and hopefully shushing, my toddler the whole way. But another example is computer labs. I could not use the computer labs on campus because again, in the computer labs, you have to kind of be quiet because other students were studying and using the computers. So it forced me, I had to buy a computer, which now is like not as big of a deal because I feel like every college student, should have a laptop. That's not the case. And we've seen that in the pandemic. But it's more commonplace, I think, for students now to have a laptop. When I was in school 20 years ago, that wasn't the case necessarily. And so I had to use loan money and grant money to invest in a computer because there was no way I was going to be able to use a computer lab on campus. Even I was nursing as a new mom starting at William & Mary, and I would have to pump in the bathroom. There weren't lactation rooms. I think now it's great to hear that swim, has a lactation room for mothers. But 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. I would have to pump in the bathroom stalls, and people would wonder what the heck is going on in there. So there were many spaces that weren't accessible to me, or that weren't accommodating to me as a mother on campus. And it does kind of shape your experience in terms of college and what is accessible to you and what's not.
Thank you. We will definitely come back to William & Mary. We want to just get a little bit more into the book and talk a little generally about the book. So I read it over Mother's Day weekend. And so I'm not a mother, but it touched me in so many ways. And because it really talks about your role as a mother, your mother's role as a mother, and you actually intertwine the experiences of many of the young women that you work with through Generation Hope. And I thought as I listened to it, gosh, that was a very vulnerable space and very brave. It took a lot of courage to share at the level that you did. It was so important that you did. So I guess my question is, did you mean to actually have it come out during Mother's Day weekend or right before that? Because it was so appropriate. And I'm not even a mother, but I think it really touched on the true meaning and the epitome of motherhood. So would you just talk about your thoughts about that?
It was absolutely intentional to release it shortly before Mother's Day because motherhood is such a central theme in the book.
Right.
And what I will say is that I believe firmly Mother's Day is about not only mothers, but motherers. And I will say, Chon, Dr. Glover, you have been such a motherer to so many students coming through William & Mary, including myself. And so you should feel celebrated on that day as well. But yeah, motherhood is a huge theme in the book. And it's really, what I invite people to think about is on Mother's Day to be really thinking about which mothers we celebrate, which mothers we validate, which mothers we recognize, and which mothers we don't. And mothers who don't take the traditional path to motherhood are often forgotten. They're not validated, and not just on Mother's Day, but on the other 364 days of the year. And young mothers in particular, because of the stigma, but single mothers as well. And I would also just say Black and Brown mothers. I mean, I think we've seen in this pandemic, the way that Black and Brown women and mothers have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 and its many impacts. And that's not a coincidence. It's about, how we treat mothers, how we value them, how we recognize them. And so I hope the book really invites people to really think about that and the ways that we can begin to change who we uplift and who we support and who we don't.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think kind of along those lines of the support, obviously of moms and people that are like moms to us. Wondering also what kind of support and networking did you receive from friends in William and Mary, and also beyond?
Yeah, so my first year was really tough because I was commuting. I was driving about 150 miles each day. I had class and spending 3 to 4 hours in traffic to be able to take my daughter to daycare or to her provider, and then to make it to campus and to do it all over again in the evening. So it was hard for me on my freshman year to really connect with friends and to make friends and to be connected to the campus. And that's something that I felt, very, very strongly that first year, just because I could not stay on campus. I couldn't be a part of things. And so much of my time was just shredded, by the commute and mothering and, being a parent. I did have a wonderful financial aid counselor, Tammy Curry, who advocated for me from the very beginning and worked with me to make sure that I was able to get a financial aid package that allowed me to actually enroll and start at William and Mary. And she was helpful from the very beginning. And then when I moved on campus, I was able to really plug into some friendships and to make friends. And I have a circle of women who have been aunties to my daughter, who just honestly embraced me as a mother. And I will say, as a parenting student, you don't know how you're going to be received by people, whether it's professors, faculty and staff, it's other peers on campus. And sometimes I had negative responses from students when they found out that I was a mom. And this group of girls, this group of women, I mean, they were just over the moon to be able to play with a baby. They were like, let me babysit. And they really just embraced my daughter and I couldn't have asked for a more wonderful circle of women, strong women, to support me as a mom at that point. And so I'm thankful that I was able to move into a family housing apartment on campus that actually allowed me to kind of plug in that way to the social network on campus.
I love that too, because we can see a little bit more of a concrete example and more of a unique experience of really what it means that we're a tribe. And so that's very special, I think, for me, that in graduating, to say, like, it's not like we're just shutting the door at the end of 4 years.
Yes.
That's it. But this university really fosters this community, and that can go beyond and can be very impactful. So I know for me, that's a very special thing, and thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah, lifelong friendships for sure.
Absolutely, I agree totally. So there is a comment and question that we've received. It's from your former professor, Professor Suzanne Raitt.
Oh,
She's listening in and watching this webinar, and she said, "I'm so happy you chose English in her class." And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your experience as an English major and how doing English specifically prepared you for the amazing things you're doing now.
That's a great question. And hello, Professor Raitt. I love that you're tuning in. There's so many things that I think I benefited from being an English major. One thing that was tough was the reading that I had to do. And I talk about that in the book, that there was always this stack of like novels and all of these things that I had to read in textbooks. That as a parent, it was really tough to kind of work my way through that. But one of the things that I think I talk about in the book is that being an English major and reading literature from incredible writers, like, really allowed me to find my voice. It allowed me to be reflective in a way that I think if I was studying something else, I may not have been able to be as reflective and really thinking about what is my voice and how do I want to show up in the world. And I really feel like by reading and analyzing works by incredible writers, from all walks of life, I was able to do that. And so that's something I really am thankful for. And writing has been something I've loved since I was a little girl. I was really thankful to be able to do it in college and to write an honors thesis. I mean, those are things that I think hugely benefited me. And today I think I'm a stronger writer because of that. But I also think, reading different perspectives and trying to understand where other people are coming from. I mean, as an English major, again, you're kind of immersed into these worlds of other people, and it does require you to analyze and be reflective and to question norms in a way that I think is kind of unique to being an English major. And in my day-to-day work at Generation Hope and in the nonprofit sector, that's really critical, that I'm always questioning, the norms, questioning and challenging the structures that we're all operating within, meeting people with totally different backgrounds than me, and really being open to, hearing what their experiences are. I think those are things that I definitely was able to grow in my time as an English major, and has made me a better person and a better nonprofit leader. In addition to kind of the practical, being a good writer, I think has been huge for me as a leader as well.
Nicole, I really enjoyed what you said about how it helped you find your voice. Because I feel like for me, storytelling is so impactful. And I think the growth in my life has come from seeing other people's stories and seeing how they have overcome the challenges. I think that's kind of, more than just general advice. You can see oh, it can happen.
Yeah.
And so I like that in finding your voice, then you were able to lift up the voices of other young parents, especially in a time that I'm sure it feels like having this odds stacked against them, saying, how do I do this? And so to have someone advocate for them is so important and so significant. So I'm wondering if there was an experience for you, whether it was at William and Mary or afterwards, that really propelled you to think, okay, I want to share my story. And that looks in the form of founding Generation Hope and then this book. I'm curious of what propelled that thought to want to share it, very loudly.
So the book came about because, when I graduated from William and Mary, I knew that my story was rare. I had no idea how rare my story was. And so I got my first job. I was working for this major insurance company, and like you do in any, kind of workplace, was getting to know my fellow coworkers, and would share bits and pieces of my story. And they would be like, whoa, wait a second. This is a big deal. You went to William and Mary, you had your daughter with you, and you need to share this story and tell people, what you experienced, so that you can inspire other people and help people to think differently. And that was the first time I'm like, okay, maybe I should kind of share my story. And so in 2007, I tried to publish this book and wanted to do exactly that, share it with the world. And two things I was told. One is that no one wants to hear about a teen parent being successful. And the second was, you have no platform. And so because of those two things, I pretty much shelved the project. And I was in a workshop with other nonprofit organizations maybe 3 years ago. And the facilitator was talking about scaling. How do you scale your impact as an organization? And one of the ways that you can do that is brick and mortar, setting up a new Generation Hope in another city. But another way that you can do that is to inspire people to do the work that you're doing all across the country, all across the world. And one of the vehicles for that can be a book. And I thought, wait a minute, I have a book that I've been trying to put out there. Maybe I should revive this project. And that's what I did. And I thankfully found an incredible literary agent, Joanne B. Jarvie, and Beacon Press, which is an incredible social justice publisher. And they just totally believed in the project and believed in me. And so that has been a labor of love that has been a long time coming. The moral of the story is don't give up. And I think for Generation Hope, I have, once I graduated from William and Mary with Narissa, I just felt this incredible calling on my life to help other young parents experience that success that came from, me walking across that graduation stage. Life changed for my daughter and I when I earned my college degree. And it's not a magic wand by any means, but it definitely is a game changer. And how do I make sure that other young parents can experience that? And I moved up to the DC region. There were no organizations that were focused on teen parents and college completion. And there was a statistic that just fueled my fire. Less than 2% of teen moms get a degree before age 30. And I thought, no, this is not okay. And I have the lived experience, by now the professional experience, to put together and to launch something that needs to exist in the world. And so that's really where it came from.
So you actually came up with the quote that I was looking for when you said, "Don't give up." And I think that, to me, that is so much what you talk about in this book, because there were a lot of things that you experienced that could have given you, said, I'm throwing in the towel. I'm not moving forward anymore. I'm not going to achieve a college degree or anything, even though you knew you wanted to and that it was possible. There were so many things that you went through that could have derailed you, but you kept going. And so we talked about your college experience, and you mentioned Generation Hope. I think it officially opened in 2010.
Yes.
2010. And so one of the questions that the audience has asked is, could you talk a little bit more about your 2-generation work with Generation Hope?
Yeah, so 2-gen work is essentially the model that we are going to help a parent and a child be successful together. Oftentimes, many of our interventions and our support services work with a parent in a silo and a child in a silo. So that means if a child isn't doing well in school, we're completely focused on that child, not recognizing that part of the issue is that their parent is unemployed. That the family is living in a shelter, and not making that connection and saying, what if we simultaneously help that parent get a job that is family sustaining, and then also address the needs of that little one? And that is kind of how many of our support services operate today. I know from my experience when I was at William and Mary, I was constantly concerned with not having the resources that I thought were critical to making sure that my daughter started her own academic career successfully and that she was really thriving in that critical early childhood time, constantly looking for quality, reliable childcare. I'm sitting in classrooms, worried about what I'm going to be able to provide for her for dinner that night, because sometimes we just didn't have money to be able to, provide her with everything that she needed. And so how did that affect me as a student sitting in my class, trying to focus on, Faulkner and, all of the different novels I'm reading? And so at Generation Hope, we are a whole family model where we're helping the parent get their college degree while we're also helping that child get ready for kindergarten. And that is through a home visiting model, through case management. We do developmental screenings and assessments. We work with parent and child to develop goals for the year. We bring brand new books into the home to build their library that are culturally relevant and age appropriate. We have family dinners once a month where parents can connect with and support one another. And we also provide monetary support for them to access high quality childcare in their community. And that's on top of what we do for the parent. And for the parent, we're doing providing tuition assistance, emergency funding, we're collecting diapers, baby wipes, all of those things. And on the emotional side, we have a robust mentoring program. We provide on-site, on our staff, mental health supports, all sorts of wraparound services to make sure that not just academically that student is thriving, but in life, that student is thriving. And I think that's what we want to see more of out in the world. And Generation Hope is now doing this national work, as I mentioned, and we're really trying to help institutions, colleges think about how can we not only support parenting students, but also have some supports in place for their little ones. And that doesn't mean that, colleges and universities turn into daycare centers necessarily, but that there is this lens with which they're looking at supporting students that considers the needs of their children, which is really critical.
Thank you.
I think what you mentioned also with the resources, like it's one thing to think for as a student, especially when if you're facing your pregnancy and kind of saying like, okay, we're told that there's resources out there, but what are there, or how can I find them? Because that's like an extra step, and I think that can go along for any minority or any group of students that are having a hard time, like if they're working to pay for their tuition, is to say I have to go through another step to be able to go to this extra course on maybe career services or something like that. So I feel like there is something to say about being able to be part of a program and a support that's saying we have the resources and we can easily outline them for you, so that you don't have to, spend another hour doing the research and trying to figure out which is the best support for me in my case, because not everything out there is for everyone. So I know that was for me very eye-opening during my internship in Generation Hope, to say, like, to be involved in the childcare and to see like everything that had to come together for these students to be able to do it all, really, because they were working, they were studying, and they were this is definitely a very general question, but what is, when you are now working with parents and our students, what is advice that maybe you've given them more personally, or something to kind of motivate them in their progress, or to encourage them?
One thing that I love to remind our students is how amazing they are right now. I think when I was in college, I was so focused on the end game, the degree, that I didn't ever stop and just say, you know what, you're killing it. You're like doing a great job, like pat yourself on the back. And I think that's really important for anybody, no matter who you are, is to just stop and take stock of what you've accomplished, what you've achieved. But as you said, Mariana, our students and parenting college students across the country they're doing so much. They're working, they're going to school, they're parenting, and they're up against so many odds that you can be so focused on the degree, the credential, that you don't stop to just say, I'm amazing. And yes, I'm working towards this degree, but right now I am amazing. And I want our students to stop and take stock of just all that they've accomplished and how incredible they are, because you also need that to fuel you, right? During those dark days, those difficult times. And I want to make sure our students feel that. I think it's really important for them too.
I think that's great. I mentioned when we were talking earlier, celebrate every small step.
Yes.
Because it gives you the energy and enthusiasm to actually, and resilience to keep going, and perseverance to keep going. Focusing in a little bit more on Generation Hope, one of the components of the program is mentorship. And so you mentioned several people in the book who really mentored you, Mama D, all of these. And could you talk about mentors that may have inspired you as you've gone along your path, and even now to, as you're working as an activist, public policy, socialist, whatever it is, mentorship for you?
Yeah. I think mentorship is huge. And one thing I think, is important to remember about mentoring is that it's really not about the perfect person, right? Like it's not about being connected to somebody who has all the answers and has figured it all out. I think the best mentors are the people who have been transparent about their struggles, their mishaps, their mistakes, the lessons learned, the insights. Those are the people I think I've learned most from, are the people who have been really honest about how tough a lot of things in life can be. I have had so many people to look up to in that sense. I think particularly for launching Generation Hope, which I talk about in the book, that, I launched Generation Hope at a time with the economy in 2010 that most people were saying, don't touch, a nonprofit, don't, try to start anything. I had some incredible women who were in positions of leadership in my community in the DC region. And I thank them in the back of the book. Terry Freeman, who was the president of the Greater Washington Community Foundation, which is a huge force in the DC region, as many community foundations are in terms of philanthropy. She early on believed in me and said, I want to support you. She gave us free office space in her DC office. She said, I'll join your board, when at a time where I'm just like, please God, anybody join my board. And Dr. Darian Pollard, who is the president of Montgomery College in Maryland, she also was an early believer in me and in Generation Hope. And I remember I gave Terry a copy of the book a couple weeks ago, and we had a call, and she said, I saw all of the accolades that you've been getting, Nicole, and all of the attention the book has been getting. And I thought to myself, who would have thought that day you came in my office, you didn't even have your 501c3, who would have thought that you would have been, here today? And she said, I thought that. And that's why I believed in you and kind of got involved. And that just meant so much to me, because again, at that time, I'm just like a woman with a vision. I have no seed funding from Bill Gates. I have nothing, I'm building this organization brick by brick. And here was somebody early on in a position to do something, who said, yes, I believe in you and I'm going to do whatever I can do to help you be successful. So those are two strong, amazing women, Black women who believed in me and believed in this organization that I think, particularly as I look at Generation Hope, have been huge mentors to me.
Before you jump in, Mariana, I'd just like to encourage everyone, if you have questions, to please put them in the Q&A. Okay, I'm sorry, Mariana.
No, you're totally fine. So we did have another question for you from the audience. If you can speak to how supporting student parents addresses poverty and leads to economic mobility for young parents and their families.
That's a really great question. So student parents are a significant population. They're an invisible population within higher ed. About 1 in 5 undergraduate students across the country is parenting. When we look at it through a race lens, it's about half of all Black female undergraduates across the country are mothers. This population tends to be, they're more likely to be low income, they're more likely to be students of color, they're more likely to be first generation college students. So there is so much overlap with student parents and all of these different student groups that we often talk about in these silos. They came into the pandemic, for example, already having been in crisis, because they tend to be low income. For example, I think almost 70% of parenting college students coming into COVID had been housing insecure in the past year. So we're talking about extreme need among this population when it comes to housing insecurity, food insecurity, basic needs. But yet they are less likely to graduate than their non-parenting peers. And that's with even higher GPAs on average than their non-parenting peers. So they have, they're doing better academically than those who don't have children, but they're 10 times less likely to make it to the graduation stage, which really speaks to the gaps and the sinkholes that we have throughout the higher ed sector when it comes to making sure this population is successful. So if we can solve it for student parents who have all of these different intersections with these other groups, we can solve it for all students. And making sure that more parenting students get to the graduation stage. Obviously, we know that when you earn a college degree, it puts you in a different position economically. It puts you in a different position from a social capital standpoint, all of the benefits that come with a college degree. And the added bonus is that child is then set up for success in a different way than they would be if their parent had not earned a post-secondary credential. So when a child is 8 years old, their parents' educational level at just 8 years old predicts their own academic and career success 40 years in the future. So as we're thinking about solutions to poverty, student parents and making sure that they earn a post-secondary credential, that teen parents get a high school diploma and are going into higher ed and completing higher ed, it's a solution that we're not talking about enough when it comes to poverty. So it's highly connected and really important for us to start focusing on.
Great. Another question is, what advice would you give students who are parents in college?
I would say keep moving forward. Stay the course. And it's really hard because there's a lot you're up against. But if you can try to keep moving forward, I think that's really critical. There's so many, as I said, there's so many sinkholes, there's so many speed bumps. But if you can make it to that post-secondary credential, it is game changing for your child. And so trying to find a way to just keep moving forward, I think is really critical.
Okay, thank you.
I thought it was very interesting, Nicole, of like you're mentioning how there's so many intersections to this particular student population and how we can be thinking bigger to also just poverty as a whole and all of these other communities and other student populations that might seem invisible to us. And so I think for me, in my experience in college, it has been wonderful to open my eyes to social justice work and seeing my experience as an immigrant and what that was like, and then kind of seeing like how that's a pocket of it and how there's so much work to do for so many other communities that I had never come across with. So I don't know if you would have any advice for students in William and Mary now of how we can continue this work on campus. Definitely the accountability of our administration is important, but there's so much that as students we can be doing. So you lived it as a student, you're now working in advocacy for it. How can we as students be doing the work right now?
That's a really good question. I think one thing that I would love to see students doing is really embracing the fact that the majority of college students don't fit the traditional mold. And that don't assume that the person sitting next to you in class has had the same experience as you, that they aren't working, that they don't have a child, that they may not have grown up in extreme poverty. Don't make those assumptions, really be open to the fact that that many students in colleges and universities across the country have had the responsibilities of working and parenting and maybe stopping out of school for a couple of years and returning, that this traditional kind of college student that we've all been conditioned to believe is the majority is actually not. It's actually the minority. And our higher ed system is set up for the minority. And we've got to do a better job of trying to shift that. And that is really about the powers that be and administrations and that kind of thing. But students can play a huge role in that. And they can help to create a more embracing and supportive environment for students who have all sorts of lived experiences and backgrounds and responsibilities. And I think that that's really key. I talked about sometimes I would disclose that I was a parent to students and I would have a wonderful supportive reaction. And sometimes I had a really negative one. And I remember sometimes having group projects, and I could not stand group projects because everybody wanted to do it in the swim at 9 o'clock at night. And I'm like, because then it's like, okay, now I have to have these uncomfortable conversations, but wouldn't it be wonderful if they weren't uncomfortable conversations? And if students would have been more like, okay, no problem, like, let's figure it out. Maybe we study in your room, or maybe we study here. So I do think that we can all play an important role in creating the environments that we want to see on our campuses.
Thank you.
Okay. Another question, how do you recruit your mentors? And are they predominantly parents who have graduated college?
To quickly answer the second question, no, we have mentors from all walks of life. That's a question that we get a lot is, what does your typical mentor look like? And it runs the full gamut. We have stay-at-home moms, we have people who've never had kids, we have doctors, we have nurses, we have teachers. We have some who have lived the experience of being a teen parent, some who have not. Really, for us, the main requirements are that, and this is going to sound very cliche, but that you have a caring heart, that you're empathetic, and that you want to really come into this situation and be a support and a cheerleader. And the second, that you're passionate about families and about education, and about our mission. Those are really the two criteria. And again, that can look and show up in all sorts of ways. And so we're recruiting mentors now. If you're in the DC metro area, we'd love to have you as a mentor in our program. And those are the only two criteria that we really have. We've had people who have been so worried, like, oh gosh, I'm not a parent, so I'm not going to know. Our students are not looking to you for all the parenting advice. They're looking to you to be a cheerleader for them and to really show up for them when they need you. So that's going to go farther than any kind of parenting expertise would.
Thank you.
I love that too, because it shows the necessity of, like what you talked about earlier, the holistic approach to this, and how it really has to be not just to say, okay, here are resources for you to study, but there needs to be a whole team behind it.
Yes.
To be able to make it, because I mean, even just a traditional student.
Yes.
Yes.
I tell people that all the time. I'm like, when we think about it, my daughter is about to finish up college, as I said, and I cannot count how many times she has called me freaking out because the class that she wanted wasn't offered when she wanted it, or when she's now in an apartment off campus, but when she was on campus, please load my laundry card, and like all and so any college student, when we think about it, needs a support system. They need cheerleaders. And the reality is, so many students in higher ed right now come into college without that support system. And so Generation Hope is really about, how do we create that? How do we provide the support that any college student would need, and to make sure that these students are successful?
Mm-hmm. I'm kind of wondering too, I think what happens with the desire to be successful, and especially when you have in mind that I need to get this degree, it can feel, I think for any student, but definitely for student parents, of I almost have to fix this, or I have to get it all together before I embark on this journey, because otherwise, how do I do it? So what would be for students right now that are thinking of going to college, and that they want to do this and they have the motivation, but they're kind of like, I have no idea how to start climbing this mountain. Like, what would be a first step for them to take?
I think one thing is, I think working with young people, what I often hear is, college isn't for me. And I think one thing that we really try to encourage, we do a lot of work of outreach in the community and going to meet young parents where they are. We go to homeless shelters, we go to schools, we go to other nonprofit organizations, social service agencies, and we plant the college seed. Many times the young parents are told, your life is over, you're not going to go to college. Or sometimes they're in situations where they were being told college wasn't an option for them to begin with. So we really have to do a lot to help them to just see college as a viable option. And I think that's a big, big piece of it, is that, there's this narrative out there about who deserves a college degree and who doesn't. And for many young people, including teen parents, there's a notion that that's for those people, right? That's not something that I could ever do. It's not something that is accessible to me. And so I think just encouraging people to see college as an option, if it's what you want to do, if it's something that you think, hey, I'd like a career in X, but it requires a college degree, to really encourage them to see college as a viable option. It is for you, and you can be successful. We have so many students who come into our program. We were just talking about a father in our program today who started college right when he had his son, and had a semester. It was a horrible semester. I mean, like a 1 point something GPA. at a community college in the DC region. And that semester just convinced him that, you know what, like college is just not for, I'm not college material. His wife ended up enrolling in college and in our program and just did amazingly well, which inspired him to say, let me give it one more try. With our support, he had 4.0 GPAs for the next 3 semesters. And so and that's less about how amazing Generation Hope is, more about how amazing he is. And the fact that, you know, he just needed that additional support, that encouragement, and the case management and the services that we try to rally around our students. But in that case, like, imagine if he had never gone back, right? Now he's working on his bachelor's degree. He's about to enter his last year at George Mason University. And so I think that notion that I don't deserve, I don't belong, that's not for me, is something that I want to encourage people to, you know, kind of think differently about.
So I want to first of all take a personal point and say, please go read the book if you haven't read the book, because you're really, really going to learn a lot. And one of the things I really appreciated, Nicole, is how you intertwine your experiences and put it into context of things that are even very prominent today.
Yeah.
So we talked about social justice, and you talked about, you know, the story that just sticks out for me is the trip that you all were taken to Florida, and your parents and were pulled. You all were pulled over by a policeman, and if you want to share, you know, additional context about that, but I think it's so prevalent and relevant to make sure that we know that this is not a problem that's going away. This is something, just like the pandemic introduced so many things to us of inequities that are here, structural and systemic racism, all of those kinds of things. But, you know, sometimes I think we want to compartmentalize issues and put them and say, no, that's just teen pregnancy. That's just, you know, teen motherhood. That's not connected to anything else. But you do a great job of actually making it all come together. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that story and that experience, but the role of your father and how that changed too, I think was very, very poignant.
Yeah, so the story that I tell in the book is, we're on vacation in Florida. I'm 12 years old. I'm in the car with my mom and dad. We're traveling down a Florida road. And the next day we're going to go to Disney World, my first trip to Disney World. And I'm so excited and just really settled in that moment of just being thrilled about going to Disney World the next day. The sun is setting. We left a family barbecue. It's just like this amazing time. And the mood in the car quickly changed. We were pulled over, as you said, by a police officer, a white police officer. And he was very stern with my father. And my father had always been this extremely powerful figure in my life. You know, whatever he said was the way things went. That's just the reality of it. And here we were in this moment where that was not what was happening. He was having to be very deferential. He couldn't make any eye contact with this police officer. I was extremely confused by it. But one thing that growing up with my parents, my father's Black, my mother's white, race was always something we talked about in our home. And I remembered in that moment the conversations about lynchings in the South and Rodney King and that verdict were very fresh in our minds. And you know, all of the things that my dad had really talked to me about in terms of what we had been through, as the Black community had been through over the years. And in that moment, I remember just having that realization that my father was not in control, that he didn't have agency in that moment, and that he knew we were in danger. As he was, you know, here he was, a Black man in the car with a white woman and a biracial child in the South at night. And that really impacted me. It's something that never left me, and it made me question the systems that I think we're often thinking young people should be completely reliant on, that we should be completely kind of trustful of. And I did think it was important in the book to make the connections between these underlying issues, racial oppression being one of them and being huge, It's not a coincidence that teen pregnancy is more prevalent in communities of color where there has been racial and historic oppression since the founding of this country. And if we're talking about teen pregnancy prevention and we're not talking about race, then we're missing the mark. And I think we're missing the mark even in higher ed. If we're talking about wanting to make sure more students of color are making it to the graduation stage, even student parent work, I often say is racial justice work. So I wanted to weave that in the book, is that we have to address these underlying issues to really make advances in all of these issues that we care about, or we're going to fall short. And I think, as you said, Chon, we're falling short and we have to do something differently. So I hope the book encourages people to do that.
Great, thank you. Do you have anything else, Mariana?
I don't believe we have any more questions as of now. Again, if you have any more questions, feel free to add them to our Q&A. But definitely this has been such a great discussion. So I know there could be a lot more to talk about. So I don't know, Dr. Glover, if there's any other areas of the book that you would like to highlight.
I just need to set up my own personal.
Uh-oh, you're muted.
Okay, I need to set up my own personal time because I have so many questions and things that I want to talk to you about. And I don't want to give the book away if people haven't read it yet. So I'm trying to hold back. I'm trying to hold on and not share that. But I would say to people that you can get it in hardback, and you can also get it on Audible. So I was able to listen to it as I was taking my walk, and I couldn't put it down. I couldn't stop listening to it. So I would just say it's just a wonderful book. And as someone who knew you at a time, you really don't know what a person's been through. And it just gave me so much more respect and appreciation for all that you did and actually have done and continue to do. And so if we don't have any other questions, if there's anything you want to wrap up with, Nicole, and just share with the audience about the book and going to get the book, getting involved with Generation Hope, whatever you like.
Yeah, no, I'm just thankful for this opportunity to be here with you all tonight. And Chon, we'll definitely schedule our time. Would love to dive in deeper. And Mariana, I offer it up to you as well. I would just encourage people, if you are interested in buying the book, you can buy it anywhere books are sold. But also Generation Hope, you can go to generationhope.org, and there's a bunch of information about how to get involved if you're in the area, but also if you're not in the area. We have lots of opportunities. We are recruiting for mentors right now, so please let us know if that's something that you're interested in. And you can find us on social media. So I'm at Nicole Lynn Lewis on Instagram and Twitter, and Generation Hope is at Support Gen Hope on Instagram and Twitter as well. We'd love to continue the conversation there with you. So, but thank you. This has been wonderful, and I appreciate the William and Mary community for doing this for us.
Thank you. And I think we're going to turn it over to Aaron at this point in time, but thank you, best wishes. And remember, tomorrow morning on NPR, Morning Edition, your interview actually on campus. So please tune in for that too. But thank you so much. It's been my pleasure for sure. And we wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you.
Aaron, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Battle. I'm the Associate Director of the William and Mary Washington Center. And I'm just going to do a quick outro. So I just want to say thank you to Nicole, first and foremost, for joining us tonight. We're thrilled that we were able to highlight your amazing story. And truly, you're an inspiration to all of us, mothers and non-mothers and everyone else in between. We really also want to thank Generation Hope for being such wonderful partners to both William and Mary and specifically the Washington Center. I can't count the number of interns, Mariana included, who have done our study in DC programs and interned for Generation Hope and have come back with just the most amazing stories. And you all have actually hired some of our alumni as well. So it's wonderful to see them succeeding with you at the helm. To Dr. Glover and Mariana, thank you so much for moderating tonight. William and Mary is just really fortunate to have all three of you as alumni and as part of our William and Mary community and family. And then finally, thank you to Dean Cooper and William and Mary's libraries, as well as the Alumni Association for co-sponsoring tonight's chat. Elizabeth, my colleague, will throw up a slide in just a second. And so for any of you that are joining us at home, if you'd like to learn more about the Washington Center, our 20th anniversary this year, or any of the programming that's going on with the libraries, you can do that on the websites that'll be put up. Just follow the links. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. But again, thank you all so much. We really enjoyed our time, and I hope everyone has a wonderful night.